There is a big gap right now that can be solved in the dental industry. The fact that as a dentist and as a staff, you have to use so many software to run your practice. So it's like, why can we bring all of these into one?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients Podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Dr. Len Tao. This episode is releasing in August. We are just over 1 month away from my event in South Florida called Supercharge Your Dental Practice. If you have any information or want information about it, please go to superchargeyourdentalpractice.com. And you can use the code RAVING, as in Raving Patients, RAVING, RAVING, to save $100 on registration. Today's podcast is with one of our newest vendors for Supercharge Your Dental Practice. The episode is called Archy's Odyssey, From Cloud to Payments. And I'm speaking today with John Ratt, who is the founder of Archy. And I met John at the CDA in May. We had a nice conversation. I'm a technology guy. I like introducing new products into the market through my podcast. So I invited John to be on here. So I'm excited to speak to John today. John, thank you for joining me and welcome to the Raving Patients Podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here with you today.
Well, I appreciate you finding the time. I appreciate you becoming a sponsor or an exhibitor at Supercharge Your Dental Practice on September 29th and 30th. I'm in Delray Beach, Florida, so I look forward to having you there. I want to read your bio just for a couple of minutes here because you have a really great background, in my opinion, and I love what you wrote in your bio. So John is a French-born tech whiz who swapped baguettes for bites when he moved to the U.S. in 2009. With a master's in computer science, he started his career as an engineer, but soon found his groove in product management, working with big names like SurveyMonkey, Uber, and Facebook. Over the past decade, John has been the wizard behind the curtain, crafting payment platforms for tech giants, including one for Uber that now juggles a whopping $100 billion annually. When his dentist wife shared her firsthand challenges of running a practice, John saw an opportunity to bring his tech savvy to the dental world. This insight led to the birth of Archy, a company John co-founded dedicated to streamlining the day-to-day operations on dental practices. Archy's mission is to simplify the administrative tasks for practice owners and their staff, allowing them to focus on what they do best, treating patients. So I love that bio, John. So can you just expand on that background a little bit? I know we just talked a little bit about Facebook.
Sure. First, thank you for reading my bio. So when I moved here in the US in 2009, I started working in tech companies again, Silicon Valley. I was excited to be here, and I got into payment quite quickly by chance. And so I was asked actually at Uber to build a payment platform that actually will allow Uber to go public. What does that mean? It means building a SOX compliant payment platform. For many SOX compliance, it means having a lot of supporting a lot of regulation, making sure that all of the payments that are recorded are not modified. If I simplified again what that means. And then fast forward, I got a chance to work at Facebook because Facebook had heard what I was doing at Uber on the payment side, and Facebook was looking to improve their payment platform. So again, I got to work for two big giants, and they were two amazing experiences in their own way. And like you said, my wife, who is a dentist, decided to open her dental practice in 2018. The process started about a year before. It was a brand new startup from scratch. And what happened is, I was actually mostly helping her, at first wherever I could. But like every dentist, she had to pick what software to use. And then hire an IT company to manage the server backup of her system. At the time, actually, she had decided to use Open Dental. Like a lot of dentists, she really liked what Open Dental was offering. Fast forward a few months after the practice being open, I told my wife, we are paying this IT company a lot of money, but I've yet to see a proof that the backup is working. And I don't know what will happen if a server crashed. Well, long story short, after a lot of back and forth, we discovered there was no backup. That was like a big shock at first. And I see you laugh, Len, and I will tell you now we laugh about it because that's what was the inception of Archy. But at the time, it was extremely scary because we were like, yes, we're a new startup, but We didn't have that many patients after 3 months, but still, it would have been a disaster if we had told all of our patients, we lost your data. And what I will say is that was actually an IT company that was referred to us by other dentists. So it was not just a random Joe that we found online. I know many people will ask, like, why didn't I do it first? If I'm a tech guy, like you introduced me to, why didn't I set it up first? Well, I was actually traveling all over the world for Facebook at the time. So I wanted someone to be there in case of an issue. And so long story short, that's how it got started. I was like, why are we still using a server? Why are we still using backup when everything we do in our day to day, recording this podcast is in the cloud? And we talk about Facebook, it's in the cloud. Raving Patients, your group is all about like being in the cloud, right? And if you have reviews, ratings, that's all in the cloud as well. And so that was really the inception of Archy. Why don't we have a cloud platform? Why do we still need a server? And then in addition to that, I actually helped my wife, again, like I said, wherever I could, but sometimes being at the front desk. And so I greeted patients, booked appointment, verified insurance, filed claims, processed EOBs. And what I found was a lot of inefficiency. And I used to be very judgmental of our front staff, wrongfully so. I was like, why would they make those mistakes? Why would they text the patient the wrong date or time for their upcoming appointment? Until I made those mistakes myself. And I was like, this should not be the case. A lot of those tasks can be automated, can be simplified. And so that was the second part of that inception of Archy. The last part was actually the fact that as a dentist and as a staff, you have to use so many software to run your practice. You have the practice management software, that is one, an imaging software, that is two. You might have a patient engagement platform to text patients, send appointment reminders. You might have a reporting platform, depending on how sophisticated your practice is, an employee management platform, a payroll platform. I mean, you see, I just listed a few. And so I was like, why can we bring all of these into one? And so all of those three reasons were the inception of Archy. Now, what happened actually, Archy didn't start in 2018 because at first I was not necessarily ready to make the jump and come in the dental industry. But COVID happened. And as you know, a lot of dentists got impacted. And impacted because you probably had to close your practice for a few months. What it meant is that a lot of people actually left the industry. A lot of dentists now to rehire their front staff, their assistant, their hygienist. And a lot of dentists were left with, how do I remind my patient about their upcoming appointment if nobody's in the practice, if nobody is there? And so that's where, again, the power of the cloud, that efficiency that we wanted to bring, made me realize like there is a big gap right now that can be solved in the dental industry. And so this is how Archie got started. That's my story. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I would be in the dental field, I would have told you, no way. I don't like blood. I don't like looking at teeth like you and other dentists. But that's our story.
I think that's amazing. And it's, there's always when you start a product, it's always really to fill a need or to make a better mousetrap, as I like to say. And, one of the questions I wonder, and I always ask, and I've spoken to a number of cloud-based, co-founders or founders on my podcast is, and the question I think a lot of people have is, okay, I have a server. Okay. Why do you switch to the cloud? So what is the reason to make the change from using a server-based system? And there's obviously the big ones, Dentrix, EagleSoft, OpenDental, just use those three, to a cloud-based platform. And there are obviously some bigger ones in the space and there's up and coming ones as well. But what is the biggest reason or what are the biggest advantages to making that change?
There are actually a few and not necessarily in the order I'm going to list them. One is accessibility. The fact that if you have a server right now, most dentists that I've encountered or asked before, whenever they close their door at the end of their day and they go home, they don't have access to their data. If they want to check their schedule, if a patient calls for an emergency, they don't necessarily have access to their patient information. Unless someone has built what we call a VPN, but after interviewing many dentists, most of them didn't even know what a VPN was. So one is accessibility. With the cloud, you can access your patient information from anywhere. The example I like to give is, if you're like my wife and you are passionate about your patient, Even when you're on vacation, if a patient calls and is in pain, you want to be able to pull up their file and see what happened, when was their last appointment. Well, the cloud will give you that. The second part actually is security. And right now, with HIPAA compliance, which is actually key in dentistry or healthcare, we always talk about security. And most people think that having a server, having a backup is sufficient, but that's not the case. And again, first, having a backup is key. And if you are in the situation we were in, you probably didn't even have a backup or don't have a backup, and you are not aware of it. The second part is many people are like, oh, but I have a backup, I'm safe. And if we think about ransomware, which we know have been increasing in the dental industry lately, even the ADA actually got hacked a couple of years ago. Ransomware work when someone actually puts something in your server. The problem is hackers are more sophisticated nowadays. They won't necessarily activate that ransomware right after they install it in your server. They might wait a few months. So yes, if you have a backup, you think you are safe, but that backup is already gone because the ransomware is in it as well. And so by using cloud platform hackers, you don't necessarily have to worry about any of this. We take care of your backup. We actually have systems in place where your data is backed up all the times, like constantly. We actually do also what we call penetration testing. We have hackers that we hire that will actually try to hack our system to make sure that we protect your data properly. And so I will stop with those two first, accessibility and security, because to me, I think they're extremely critical. And of course, I mean, the last part of accessibility, I talked about COVID and the lack of staff nowadays. We see there is a trend with like remote employees, and it doesn't have to be overseas. It could also be like hiring someone who cannot commit to a 9-to-5 job, opening the practice and closing the practice because they have to go pick up their kids. Well, now you can offer to have that flexibility, work sometime from home, and then finish your day from home as well. So again, accessibility, security are the two main ones that I will emphasize.
Got it. And, I obviously don't practice anymore, but I'd always thought I'd be switching to a cloud-based platform at some point. I never made the switch because I knew my time was limited in the last few years I was out there. But there are obviously many cloud-based platforms. So let's talk about some of the things that make Archy, I don't want to say unique, but different to some cases. So why don't we pick on some of the things we wanted to talk about here? And look, being someone who sells a third-party software, I'm very well aware that there is lots of different software you could be using. And it's crazy in my opinion. I talk to dentists all the time and they have so many different platforms that overlap one another. And it's mind boggling. So I know one of the biggest advantages is cloud allows things to be, you have one software to do everything and the entire offer needs to some extent. But let's go into some of these things related to Archy specifically. So let's talk about Archy's all-in-one platform.
So first, when I say all-in-one nowadays doesn't mean anything because literally every platform out there call themselves all-in-one. But with Archy, what we mean by all-in-one is all the tasks that your staff, and here I will emphasize on your staff as a practice owner, can do within Archy. There is actually even one component that we do that nobody else does at this time, which is managing your employees and processing their payroll. Why? Because in the dental field, as you know, more than I do, first, each practice will work in different way. But yet most, if not all employees will clock in, clock out, which means you have their timesheet. The last piece that you can do is process their payroll with all the tax calculation. Well, Archy does it internally. You don't have to use a third-party payroll. You don't necessarily have to even pay for a CPA to do it for you. Let that CPA handle the most important part of doing the taxes and so on and accounting, but not necessarily running the payroll. Now, within Archy, again, we are, like I said, a scheduling platform, which means as a practice, you can manage all of your appointments. We are also an imaging platform. All of your x-rays, intraoral images, panoramic x-ray are taken on Archy, and you can actually handle them on Archy, display them on Archy. You don't need a third-party software. And again, if you are in the middle of a beach in Hawaii and you still need to access your patient x-ray, you can do that. The other example I like to give is If you are in Silicon Valley here, many people have Tesla. You can even pull your patient X-ray from the Tesla screens, and that works like a charm. We're also an insurance management platform, your RCM platform, where you can file your claims, even add all the attachment to those claims within Archy. You don't have to use your clearinghouse software to go add those attachments. And I know how annoying it can be when you file your claims. Then after you have to go on the clearinghouse platform for each claim, upload your x-rays, your clinical notes, or your perio chart. You can also process all of your EOBs. And here is one where, because I used to spend all of my Saturdays processing my wife EOBs, I was like, we need to make this faster, easier. And I take pride in saying that we have decreased the time that is required to process EOBs. So now your staff also can multitask and do more. We're also a reporting platform. As a practice owner, what is important to you? Knowing how you're performing, helping your staff knowing what they can do to help you see more patients, treat the patients that have not been treated recently. And the way we actually handle reporting is a bit different than the other platform. And here, maybe it's a question for you, but when I look at the other software out there, they have a lot of reports. If I pick Dentrix, they have 700 reports. I doubt you have ever looked at all of those reports yourself, or even your staff has ever looked at those. The way we think about a report is a bit different. We think about it as like you have a question to which you want an answer. And then after that answer, you want to take actions. That's how Archy reporting has been actually built. So we can help you answer those questions and sometimes even automate some of those actions so you don't have to do anything. Finally, we're a patient engagement platform. So automated texting, online booking, is all integrated into Archy. And like I said, we manage all the employees. So that's actually, when I say all in one, we literally handle all of the tasks that your front staff will have to do within our platform.
Yeah, that's really interesting, especially when we had spoken first about the platform. I was totally blown away by the payroll part of it, because that is that's a pain in the butt, because you use Dentrix or one of these platforms. They have the time clock. The time clock's not even right. You have to convert it to send it to the payroll company, because they do it a little bit differently than what Dentrix has. So, that's fascinating that you've thought about things that I don't think anybody else has. And I think that's really makes, I think that's where your tech background comes in from, a really big thing. But one of the things I know you spend time on at both Facebook and Uber is payments. Now, you've obviously incorporated payments into Archy as well. So can you touch base on that a little bit?
Yes. And I will say, so payment again is my background. And this is one where I have interviewed quite a lot of dentists before starting Archy. And I still remember one anecdote where I went to see a dentist here in North Bay in San Mateo County. And I was in the waiting room when it's a pediatric dentist. And so I was in a waiting room. The last patient was leaving, a son with his father. And the office manager was like, sir, you actually have a remaining balance for your son's last two appointments that were for like 3 and 6 months ago. And the father was like, what do you mean? What is that for? And so that caused actually a very interesting discussion. While your insurance didn't pay what was estimated, if you're a dentist, your staff, you have been through this. And so when I actually, after talk to this dentist, I was like, I heard that conversation, and he was like, yes, sometimes I feel like I'm loaning money to my patients with zero interest. And that's actually often the case if you're a PPO practice or HMO practice where you don't get paid fully at the time of the appointment. So with Archy, we wanted to make it easier for you and your staff to collect payment. Of course, we provide a point of sale, a credit card machine to take credit card payments at the time of the appointment. We also store the credit card on your patient's account. So if you file a claim, you process an EOB, now your patient has a remaining balance, you can charge right away. You don't even have to follow up with an invoice to your patient. You can actually charge. And then finally, we also do online payment. So in the case where you don't have the credit card on file for your patient can still go online, log in to the patient portal and pay for their invoice. Now there is one part I want to emphasize with payment, because this is a question I get quite a lot. What about payment fees? And this is one where there is a lot of um, misinformation right now, where I have dentists who will tell me like, I don't pay any fees or I pay 1.5% fees. This is not true. This is not possible. They are what we call interchange fees, which is Visa, MasterCard, Amex. They charge those fees to actually allow the banking system to work. On top of that, each bank, the acquiring bank, so the bank of the practice, the issuing bank, the bank of the patient, will add those fees as well, plus payment processors and so on. And so that's one where often when people ask me, like, how much do you charge? What do you charge? Can I avoid paying those fees? I'm like, no, you can't. The only way you can avoid is if you pass those fees on to your patient, which is what some platform will advertise without necessarily disclosing it at first. For us, we don't do that at this time, but we do support all kind of ways for a patient to pay and make it easier even for the staff to actually collect payment from their patients.
And not that this is about Archie, but Bird Eye has a payment product. So I deal with, I talk about payments with various clients. And yes, they say, well, I'm only paying 1.7%. I'm like, no, that's impossible. There's too many people involved. There's so many people there's like layers and layers of people that have to get paid. You have so many fees that you're paying that you don't even incorporate it. So you need to send over your statement and we will tell you what your fee is. You may be paying 1.7%, but that doesn't include any of the fees that you have to pay as well. So it all is relative, to be honest with you with that. So, so Archie has its own payment processing. Are you using Stripe?
We are not using Stripe, and for the simple reason that Stripe was too expensive. We actually did, like, Stripe charge on average 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. And so for us, we wanted to be able to actually be lower. And since my two co-founders and my two co-founders of Archy were also at Uber working on the payment platform with me, we actually built our platform ourselves, and we use actually a payment processor behind us, but that actually cuts some of the middlemen that you will have if you are using Stripe.
So you're able to offer a more competitive rate because of that.
That's right. And and I will say for people who are actually looking at how much fees they pay, also look at what we call card present, card not present fees. People talk sometimes to me about Square. Square will charge 2.5% when a patient swipe or tap their card, but 3.5% when the patient pays online. There's a big gap right there. And so I always advise people to really look at the granularity of what fees do they pay. Like you said, look at your statement, make sure you ask someone who knows payment to help understand how much fees you are paying.
I still remember I was talking to a dentist and he was like saying, I'm getting the best rates, and he's using WorldPay, and WorldPay through Dentrix, they're like the worst. And I literally remember seeing, after computing all the stuff on the back end, he was paying like 9%. It was crazy numbers. And he was like, I had no idea. There is no idea. You don't realize that. You really don't. So that's absolutely crazy. So we talked about payments. We talked about your payroll. Let's talk about, HIPAA compliance. So can you talk about HIPAA compliance and cloud in general? I mean, there's a lot of controversy about HIPAA. What's the violation? What's not? Can you touch base on HIPAA and cloud?
Yes, and that's one that I get quite often when people actually change from their on-prem server software to Archy. They often ask me, "Can I get rid of my IT company?" And I tell them usually, like, how much do you know about tech first? Can you actually handle still the security of your practice? Because Archie, we actually handle a lot of the security, but yet there is still like protecting your computers from being hacked. Again, someone trying to steal a password. And so with Archie, we handle a lot of the HIPAA compliance. Again, we actually have features specifically for HIPAA. But when we look at on-prem server right now, Open Dental, Dentrix, Eaglesoft, they all say they are encrypted, but they are not. And that means if you really want to be protected, you need to have strong security within your practice. You need to actually have what we call a firewall to protect, like, what are the data coming in and out of your practice. And I always tell people, like, if you feel like you are HIPAA compliant right now, just because you have a server and an IT company, you might be wrong. An example I said for Archie, we do penetration testing. We have people trying to hack our system on a regular basis. I always tell dentists, do that as well for your practice. Ask, like there are companies for that, where you can ask them, try to hack my system, try to hack my practice. And I will say most often than not, you will see you are not safe. And so HIPAA is not a joke, actually. Yes, there is not that much enforcement. And what I hear often from dentists is, oh, it's not going to happen to me. I'm a small fish. Like I'm not a target. Unfortunately, dentists, and not just dentists, like a lot of healthcare practitioners are becoming easy target. Often I hear, oh, but Facebook got hacked. I won't get hacked. If you think about it, what data do you have on Facebook? As a user, some photos, some posts that you have made maybe even 10 years ago, and you're like, I don't want anybody to see it. But as a dental practice, you have all of your patient information. SSN, which again, if you use an open dental today, SSN are not encrypted. There is literally no encryption. Think about it. If you think you're not a target, you're actually lying to yourself. And so that's where HIPAA compliance right now, if you are not using a cloud platform, you might be at more risk than not with that compliance.
Got it. And then the last question I have is, how do you suggest someone's listening to this podcast? There are so many different cloud-based platforms. I'm not even going to list them all, but there are so many of them out there now. There's some newer ones. There's some obviously legacy ones that have been around for a lot longer. How do you recommend someone makes a decision as to which platform they use?
That's a great question. And I always say, get a demo, test those products, and try to see if it fits with the type of practice you run, if the type of employee that you have. And why do I say that? We see it on Archy right now. The younger generation of dentists, usually when they get a demo of Archy, they tell us like, this is nothing we have seen elsewhere. Why? Because we built it in a way that is more efficient, easier to use, easier to understand. I always say you could hire someone to use Archy, and within a few hours, they can book appointment, verify insurance, do like pretty much all of their tasks. But again, there are practices for which I will say were not the right fit. And so it's all a matter of a learning I've had over the last 2 years. Each dentist, each practice is different. You all run your practice in your own way. And so make sure that you get a demo, and however you like to run your practice, that the software will fit your need and help you be more efficient. That's the best way to do it. I always tell people, like, I won't push for someone to sign up with us if they have not experienced other cloud-based platform first, because I want them. It's a big decision, right? You don't want to have to switch every few months, even every year. And also the last piece is look at what data will be transferred. Not every practice management software will convert the same type of data. We take pride on the amount of data that we migrate, that we transfer. So that's one that you should actually make sure you verify with each software.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most difficult decision to make as to what to switch a practice management software, because it can wreak havoc on a practice because stuff is just so different. I think I told you, and when I sold my practice, a new owner wanted to switch to Open Dental, and she had us use it for a month. I'm like, and I was retiring, so it didn't affect me. But I was like, this is so far into me. I don't want any changes before I'm out. And I think the team did the same, and she still hasn't switched. So it is a difficult decision and a hard decision to make. So I definitely agree with that. So all right, so let's switch gears here as we wrap this up. We're going to switch to our Q&A, John. So I'm going to ask you some questions here. Just answer them very quickly. You don't have to go into long, drawn-out answers, okay?
Let's do it.
So what 3 adjectives describe your strengths?
I don't know if I will use adjective, but like I'm dedicated, committed, and I would say disruption. I want to disrupt.
Okay. That was the next question I couldn't ask. You already answered it. What made you start your company? We discussed that. So, what's your media diet like? How do you limit your media consumption?
It's because of work. I don't necessarily spend time on social media, but usually when I go to bed, that's when I catch up with news, and whether it's Facebook, Twitter, IG, those 3. I actually don't read news outlet. I get my news through the social media directly.
Got it. Do you have a system in place to keep yourself organized?
There is actually one, and I will give kudos to my co-founder. I use the Pomodoro technique, which actually times how much time you can spend on each task. So when I'm not in a meeting, I use the Pomodoro technique to time myself. And so actually it's good for your mind because you only have limited amount of time that you can focus on one topic. And so that's one that I highly recommend.
Okay. When you were a child, what was the first thing you wanted to do when you grow up?
I wanted to be a baker. Being French, I love baking. I love cooking. Wanted to be a baker. Met a baker one day who asked me if I wanted to work over the weekend at night when people are sleeping. And I was like, no. And that was the end of my baking journey.
Got it. Who do you look to for advice or mentorship?
Some former colleague and executive from Facebook. Actually, he became an investor into Archy. And he's the person who is very sound and bring me back to earth. And he's my mentor, closest friend. He's not necessarily a big name here, but someone I highly respect and value.
Got it. Do you have a favorite business podcast?
Actually, it's not business, and I'm here in the Bay Area. I love the Draymond Green show. If you like basketball and NBA, it talks about, again, it's not a business, but it talks about basketball in a way that nobody else does because he plays the game, he knows the game. And so I wish actually, even in tech, in business, sometimes people will talk about stuff that they don't know. You talk about one. I love your podcast because I know you talk about something you know. I love your group too, like Raving Patient, because it's one where any dentist can learn and get better at one thing, replying to patient reviews. So not I'm trying to promote your podcast and your group, but I actually love what you do there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. What is one subscription you can't live without?
Spotify.
All right. What deserves all of your attention but seldom gets it?
I mean, right now my attention goes to two things, my wife and Archie. So outside of that, and both are like my top priority. So that's it.
Okay. And last question, can you describe your approach to marketing in one word?
Partnership.
Okay. Well, this was great. You did really well there. So, Jonathan, someone's listening to this podcast. They have interest in learning more about Archy. How can they reach you or find out more about the product?
They can actually find us at archy.com, archy.com. And they can also email me at john@archy.com. So jon@archy.com. And if you mention Raving Patients when you contact us, you might actually even get a special. I won't tell you here because you have to contact us first. But make sure you mention Raving Patients.
There you go. So guys, if you have interest in learning more about what Archy can do for you, please reach out to John. Check out their website. Let them know you heard about them through our podcast and they've got a special offer for you. So, John will be at my event September 29th and 30th, 2023 called Supercharge Your Dental Practice. Go to superchargeyourdentalpractice.com and use the code RAVING to save $100 on registration. I hope to see you there. Jonathan, thank you so much for your descriptions and the way you handle yourself during this podcast. It was a great episode. We've discussed a lot of different topics and I'm really excited about the future of cloud-based dentistry or cloud-based practice management software. Guys, if you like the episode, please share it. Please tell your colleagues. Please tell your colleagues to learn more about Jonathan. I didn't mention the sponsors at the very beginning, so I'll mention them now. I want to thank the Doc Sites and Dental Intelligence for their support. And as always, remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, John, thanks so much for joining me today, and we'll talk to everyone soon.
My pleasure. Take care.